The problem is, and the problem has always been, that women are not nurtured outside of that and inside of it. We're not given the tools. We're told to just figure it out. This is why we're very creative and intuitive, right? And we've had to figure out how to make this work for our charges, but mostly at the detriment of our own well-being.
That's Rebekah Pierce, and this is Roar. Hi, everybody. This is Danielle Davies, the host of Roar. Today's guest is Rebekah Pierce, educator, author, veteran, and a womanist whose work sits at the intersection of teaching, healing, faith, and care. Among other things, Rebekah is the author of Before the Lesson Begins, a book that challenges one of our most deeply ingrained assumptions, that learning should begin with productivity rather than humanity. Drawing from decades in the classroom, she argues that before content, before assessment, before performance, there must be breath, reflection, and affirmation. What makes this conversation especially aligned with Roar is Rebekah's womanist lens. Womanism asks us to pay attention to who's doing the work of sustaining communities, emotionally, relationally, and spiritually, especially in spaces shaped by inequality. In education, that sustaining labor has long fallen to women, and disproportionately to women of color. This episode is about what it means to teach, lead, and advocate inside systems that were never designed for wholeness, and how women so often become the ones holding space, absorbing harm, and quietly creating conditions for others to survive and grow. Rebekah, welcome to Roar.
Thank you. That was a lovely intro.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm starting to think it's my specialty. I was like, nobody listens to anything else, just listen to the intro.
I love it. It was good.
Good. I'm so glad. And thank you so much for being here.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
I appreciate it. Well, I'm just going to dive right in because I know that, feminism's like, a big catch-all term and I am a feminist. I consider myself a feminist, but you identify explicitly as a womanist, not just as an educator or an advocate or even a feminist. What does womanism give you intellectually or spiritually that mainstream feminism doesn't?
Well, feminism doesn't consider spirituality or individuality in terms of your connection to whatever you choose to call the energy that guides your life, God, the divine, Yahweh, whatever. I refer to it as God, of course, or the universe. And so feminism is really, and believe me, I was a feminist too. I'm still partially a feminist, right? But feminism does not allow for introspection on an individual level. And then to be able to bring that introspection, that self-awareness into the classroom and then attach it to curriculum. It doesn't do that. Feminism only looks at gender inequality, and systems. But what womanism does is it allows you to go even further than that. How are people impacted by systems on both a spiritual level, an emotional level, a physical level, a financial level? How are we impacted by that? And when you look at the classroom, that is the greatest microcosm for where you can see the impact of systems on individual learning, access to learning, but also as a group. The impact of a system that was designed to keep others out. You can see that impact in the classroom. And again, I teach at the collegiate level, but I started out in a public school, teaching high school English. And this is where I started seeing that there was a huge gap in being able to connect the individual to what it is that they're learning and why they're learning it. The why was missing. Just we got to learn this today. But why? How is that connected to my own lived experiences?
Right? Especially when you're not saying like the why is to pass a test.
Exactly. And passing a test is not always indicative of having learned anything. And I say that to my students. If you get an A in my class, whether you get an A or a C, you know that you worked your butt off and you did the work, because my class is not about a grade. It's about who you are as an individual that is connected to a community. So how can I bring you to the awareness of your individuality so that then you can be ready to receive what I'm about to teach you the skills I'm about to give you. How can you do that? So womanism for me is all encompassing. It looks at race. It looks at gender inequality. It looks at socioeconomic status. It looks at all of that and then says, but who am I as a human being? And what is my role in this world? What is my why? And how can I tell my story in a way that it belongs to me, but it also gives others permission to find their story and tell it as well.
I love this. Thank you for the explanation because I was
Mhm.
looking into it and it seems like it's like a more robust, I mean, not to
It
just
is.
compare it, but a more robust.
It is. It goes further, because I'm also a humanist. I mean, that's how I started teaching as a humanist. And humanism looks at the humanity. That's what you do. Look at the totality of the picture. Like, how did we get here? So when you merge humanism with the microcosm, a little small piece of humanism, which is feminism, but then wrap it around womanism, that gives you a bigger picture of all of these things. And the little dot in the middle is the human being, the self. How is the self impacted by the outer circle, all these things that are out there? How does it allow you to grow? How does it stymie growth? How does it do that? And that's a big thing that's missing for young people. I hear a lot of talk about, oh, young people don't know this and they don't feel that. That's because nobody's teaching them context within the frame of all of this hoorah. Who am I in the middle of all this? Who do I want to be? Who do I need to be? And how do I get there? That's what's missing. And that's what I feel, womanism kind of allows. I mean, there's different branches you could say. I hate to say branches, but I consider myself a womanist ethicist. And then I'm looking at the ethics of the human being. And then around that is leadership. How are you an ethical leader? And then of course you have womanist theology and bringing in the spiritual context and all that. So yeah, it does have arms. But the overall umbrella is that womanism allows us to first look at self and then move outward.
I love that. Thank you. I appreciate it. And speaking of, self and even coming from the perspective now of the educators who might read your book or even just, I think lay people would get a benefit from it. But, teaching is a profession dominated by women. It
Mhm.
also requires constant emotional regulation.
Yes.
Having been a sixth grade teacher, I can tell you that is what I lacked. That is why I'm no
Yes.
longer a teacher. How
I
do you
don't teach there.
how do you see women educators being asked to carry far more than they're resourced or recognized for?
It's destructive. It is destructive. And the reason why teaching is a heavily female dominated uh, industry is because it's the only place they allowed women to go in the first place. Because women were supposed to be responsible for the nurturing of children. It's part of the women's sphere philosophy of what the role of a woman was. It wasn't to be in public speaking or to be in these so-called male dominated world of, journalism, politics, blah, blah, blah. Our responsibility was to, or let me rephrase that, the role of white women. The responsibility was to nurture the home and the children that are in the home. By extension, Black women, particularly after slavery, our role was to almost do the same thing. That white patriarchal assumption about what a woman's role was, now that Black women were considered to be quote unquote women, although partially in treatment, that became our role too. And a lot of people can say, well, that's because women are more nurturing. We do have multi emotions. We are able we are able to see around the corner and predict and make decisions based on what we think is around that corner based on our lived experiences. So teaching by extension becomes a quote unquote the role of the woman because it's about nurturing. The problem is, and the problem has always been, that women are not nurtured outside of that and inside of it. We're not given the tools. We're told to just figure it out. This is why we're very creative and intuitive, right? And we've had to figure out how to make this work for our charges, but mostly at the detriment of our own well-being.
Oh, yes.
At the
Yes.
detriment of our own well-being. And that has been the biggest cross that we as women have carried, particularly in the field of education. And I say that has to change because I cannot authentically and intentionally And in wellness, give what I do not have in my well to give. And so this is why teachers, are dropping out. They're leaving their profession while we're burnt out, while we're tired, while we're angry, while we're frustrated. And then this leads into why we're overstressed, why cardiovascular disease is the number one killer of Black women in particular. Why we're overeating, why we're obese, why we smoke, why we drink. You know, these effects of the cause, which is y'all just getting your figured out. You're women, you'll figure it out. That is so harmful. And that's
With
the other thing.
26 sets of eyes on you. Like, what, you know?
Yes, yes, 26. And then with 26, not only 26 eyes, but 26 different stories,
Yes.
26 different personalities, 26 different traumas, 26 different lived experiences. How do you get a class to buy into growth and expansion and wellness when the teacher isn't even well? Yeah, that's the question. How do you do? You can't. That's why the system is so broken. That's why these kids are, if they make it to me at the collegiate level, why they don't have reading skills intact where they should be. I have grown people reading at third, fourth grade level with assistance, writing at third, fourth grade level with assistance. These young people don't know how to analyze rhetorical analysis. All they know is opinion, and that is an absolute no-no in the classroom. We're not here for your opinion. We're here for your position. What is your argument? What is the evidence to support it? How do you defend that? And when you have young people who are coming in the system that because they're tired, our teachers are tired and worn out and they're not supported. And because they're coming from a system where the teachers are just like, here, just go ahead and do this. Just go ahead. Then they're not learning those skills in a way that is life sustaining, that is skill building. So when they come to our classes, a lot of teachers are not going to rebuild that skill. They're just going to press forward, and that means we have young people failing. I just can't do that. I'm going to give you, I'm going to teach you, and you're going to leave this classroom better than when you walked in it. But that also requires energy. It requires a love, a passion for what you do, but it also requires wellness. I have to be well because it's a
Yes. And I
lot.
feel like I wasn't even prepared to ask you this, and this is opening up a whole giant, this is potentially like 6 hour long conversation,
Uh-oh.
but I won't do that. I'll just briefly touch on it because you've got obviously suggestions that are practical and personal and can be used in the classroom, but systemically in the nation, in the world, do
Mm-hmm.
you have any thoughts? Because you're right. It's all just one cycle. I mean, I know as a young teacher, I was totally overwhelmed, totally afraid,
Mm-hmm.
literally without resources until physical resources, books, textbooks until November of my starting year.
Wow.
Um, the lack of support, and it is no one single person's fault. This is a
Mm-mm.
systemic issue. It goes on
Yes.
and on and on. You can't blame one principal, one school. It's all intertwined so much, and of course it leads to crises when people are older. It leads to a failing economy. It leads to everything stems from education. And so I'm just
Mm-hmm.
curious what your thoughts are on education as a whole. I realize this is not,
Oh, wow.
yeah, just curious.
It's killing our young people. It is killing creativity. It is stifling joy. It is terrorizing children. I'm sorry. It is. It is because when I see these young people come to my classroom first week of school, these young people are legit broken. I mean, I when I returned back into the classroom in 2022, um, excuse me, 2024, I literally witnessed young people falling apart at the slightest question. And I'm like, why are these babies falling apart? Because I'm asking them, why did you write that? Or what other way can we reframe this? And what I have come to believe is that it's because they have no foundation of self. COVID did a number. I think COVID really revealed the true depths and despair of the educational system in this country, because we had students coming in that are just not there. And for me to answer the question is it's a loaded question. It literally is one person at a time. I can't change the world. I mean, when I first started teaching, I went in there like a lot of young teachers. Oh, I'm going to save the world. I'm going to save all the children. No, ma'am. Mm-mm. What I ended up doing by like year 10, year
Sorry,
10,
it's relating. Go
I
ahead.
know, right? And that's the thing I think that's missing. We're not teaching teachers how to teach. We're not teaching teachers how to do that. We're not teaching them how to be cognizant of their own strengths and weaknesses, and the fantasy and the illusion of what a teacher is.
Ah,
And so and so I had to come to the terms with, if I can get one young person to get that light bulb to go off for one young person in this entire school year, then I have done my job. Because all it takes is one. If you can reach the one, then the one can go out and reach the many. And so it's always been my drive of, I'm focusing on the students who want to learn, who want to be here. I can't save everybody. The rest of you who don't want to be here, there's nothing I can do about that. But if I can get that one student to buy into what I'm offering, if I can continue to buy into what I'm offering, what I'm giving, and what I'm receiving, then that's the only thing that I can do. This system, the educational system in this country, is just, it was never founded, it was not founded on equal footing in the first place. I can get into a whole history of the educational system in the United States of America as an English teacher. That's a whole 6-hour conversation right there.
Yes, exactly.
It was never founded on equality, or equal access to resources. And so we're already behind the 8 ball. So what I feel in writing my book is that if I can just get the teacher, if I can get that one teacher, that one human being to buy into, I know I'm supposed to be here. This is my calling, but I'm tired. I'm worn out. I'm overwhelmed. How do I reconnect to get back into this? And for me, the answer is, you got to begin with self. You've got to start taking care of yourself mentally, spiritually, physically, because you cannot walk into that classroom broken.
Quick pause, because if you're listening to Roar, I have a feeling you're exactly the kind of person I write for. I send out a Substack newsletter where I go a little deeper, more personal stories, behind the scenes thoughts, and honestly, some of the things we don't always say out loud here. If you want to stay connected between episodes, you can find it at roarwithDanielleDavies.substack.com. I'd love to have you there. And now, back to your regularly scheduled podcast. This leads me back to your book. So you write about this, right? Leading with breath, affirmations,
Yes.
reflection for, before academic content, not just for the students, but for the teacher, right?
Yes.
It helps everybody. But these practices are often treated as secondary, right? Even unnecessary within the traditional educational system. I, one time was like, we're going to do yoga poses. My class, I was a very short-lived teacher. Why do you think forms of care are so often associated with women? Why do you think these thoughts, these forms of care are so often undervalued, both in education and beyond? I mean, there's no doubt about the benefits. People have done so many studies on the benefits of meditation, affirmation, self-care. It's taking care of oneself, but we poo-poo it like it's not that important.
Well, I mean, for me, I can only speak for me. I made it a requirement. I made it part of my curriculum, my syllabus. This is what this is my classroom. This is, I'll be honest, my students know, day one, I'm the alpha, and this is my space. And in this space, this is what we do. This is what we do. And it's on your syllabus. We will begin every class with breath and affirmation and free writing. This has to be a habit. You create a disciplined, structured moment for young people, because that's one of the things they're missing. They're missing structure, consistency. They're missing that. And the teacher has to be adamant that this is how my classroom will go. And we will do this regardless of what is happening externally or internally, because we need this in order for the lesson to begin. We need this. My students need this moment. These kids are coming in rushed, pressed, stressed, overwhelmed. That doesn't make for an effective learning environment. That does not. So how do I get you to stop for a moment? How do I get you to just sit for a moment and close your eyes, relax your shoulders, put your phone down, close your tablet, close your eyes, let your tongue rest at the bottom of your mouth, and let's just breathe. Big breath in, exhale. The next time you inhale, I want you to think of something positive, love, joy, peace, understanding, whatever it is you need. And then on the exhale, get rid of the garbage, fear, worry, doubt. All right, now let's go into free writing. What's on your mind? If you don't know what's on your mind, write that down. That's the first line. I don't know what's on my mind. And then they write for 5 minutes. Don't ask me. If you can share, I don't want to know. That is between you and the paper. That's between you and spirit. I don't need to know. We don't share. We don't share. All right, 5 minutes. All right, here's your affirmation statement for today. I am the architect of my life. I build its foundation and I choose its contents. What does that mean? Who has control over how your life goes? We do. Exactly. What is the foundation of your building? And that's where I talk about in the book, gratitude versus grievance. Did you wake up this morning? Was the first thing on your mind gratitude or grievance? Because whichever one you started with, that's how your whole day is going to go. So the foundation of your life is either gratitude or grievance. There's only two emotions we come into this world with, fear and love. And everything falls under one of those. Pick one. So if your foundation is gratitude, then what are the contents that you are now putting into that building? And you have to stick with that, because again, it's not just for them, it's also for you, the teacher. It is the reminder for you, the teacher, of your why. Why am I here? Because I sure as hell don't get paid well. We don't
But
get
you're right.
paid well.
Even just listening to you go through that,
Yeah.
it settles the mind and it settles you so that you are able to
Mm-hmm.
take on more. It's like that whole
Exactly.
filled sponge thing, like,
Exactly.
but
Right.
I love, the writing component also. And I
Mm-hmm.
know writing is central to your pedagogy, but for women and girls in particular, and I realize you're writing for all students, but
Mm-hmm.
for our purposes, we're also specifically leaning towards women and girls. How does reclaiming voice become a form of survival?
No, I don't like to say survival, thriving. Thriving.
How does
We
it
have to
become
we
a
have to
form of
thrive.
thriving?
It allows young women in particular to reconnect itself. Because I mean, again, I cannot tell you how many young women come to this class. These girls, I have so many stories of young girls who are just. I had one young lady last semester, born and raised in Afghanistan, brought to this country. Yeah, I tell you how many times that young lady stood before me crying because of the conflict between her parents and what she wanted now in America. Because my class challenges belief systems in ways that harm the individual. But when you belong to a culture where women are not allowed to have voice, my class can be quite challenging, because I'm giving you pieces, I'm giving you stories, and I'm giving you activities, opportunities that allow you to tap into self. And I don't have all the answers. You have to figure out, how do you now take that into your community that doesn't allow that, or that looks down upon that. And that young lady, the last time I saw her, because she disappeared the last 2 weeks of class, the last thing she said to me was, she gave me a hug and she cried. She was crying. She said, "Miss Pierce, I wish you were my mother." And it broke me, because I know, oh God, I'm probably going to cry and think about it, because there's nothing I could do but to encourage her to just keep finding you, keep looking for you, keep reading, keep writing, keep present, because it's so overwhelming when these young women, they want so much for their lives, but the gatekeepers have hidden the key. And in some cases, they've had to redesign a key, their own unique key to their lives. And so I also say, kind of going back to the breath work, what I do for students who don't want to engage with that type of process, I say to them, well, you will respect everyone else in this class while we do this. If you don't want to participate in the breath work, then you are to sit there and to remain quiet until we are done. Because what we will not have is disrespect of others' choices. You don't have to participate, but you must remain quiet because we are a collective, we are a group. And in this class, we are rolling on this train together. So if you don't want to participate, that is fine. I'm not going to be mad at you. There's no grade for this, but I would hope that at some point you would want to try this, right? And so for what you begin to see in the writing is that the young women in particular, but even the young men, they begin to express in their writing how these activities, before the lesson activities, have begun to help them outside of the classroom recenter and gather themselves. It's beginning to help them find a voice, their voice. It's beginning to help them shape that voice, beginning to help them see that they have a voice and they can speak on certain things. And so for young women, what it's beginning to do is it's beginning to allow them to say, oh my God, I do matter. I matter more than I ever thought. Yes, you do. You do. And so it's given confidence by the end of 15 weeks. I mean, again, how do you get 18 to 20 something students to buy into this type of activity for 15 weeks? You have to be persistent. You have to be consistent. You cannot get off the track. Every time we meet, this is what we're doing. It's on the syllabus. This is what we're doing every week, every time,
But
2 times a week.
it's awesome because you're giving them like it's in some ways it's like creating focus, right? Like
Yes.
so that they have focus, but it's also giving them
Mhm.
the space to like
Yes,
open up and breathe and kind of get clear
exactly.
on things. Especially, you talked about that young woman, and so many women here, even growing up here, are conditioned to be good, quiet,
Yes.
composed, don't be too much, don't speak up, put yourself kind of in the corner. I'm just all of a sudden thought of baby in the corner. But what happens when girls are given space to be fully human?
And then connect them to stories where that is demonstrated. So I talk a lot. I talk a couple of times in the book about how one of the first stories we read is Sojourner Truth's Ain't I a Woman? Now, this piece is powerful, not just for the young girls, because I'm going to tell you, most of the young men in my class gravitate to that speech by the time we're done. Because what I show them in this speech is this: how could a woman, newly freed from slavery, who had the audacity to sue the United States government to get her child back from the master, saying that her child was sold illegally, and not only to have the bravado to find a lawyer and go do that, but to win, and then to say that God called me to travel this country to speak against the evils of gender inequality and race by extension. And then for her to walk, because ain't no buses, there ain't no train, ain't none of that in 1851. For her to walk to Ohio, stand in front of that National Convention Center building. And this is where I always stop my students and I say to them, what must she have been thinking and saying to herself before she walked into that building where she knew behind those doors was a group of white men and white women that could immediately sell her back into slavery? Because what law was just instituted 1 year prior to 1851? One out of maybe 27 students knows the law, and that law is the Fugitive Slave Law Act, which says you can snatch any colored person off the street and sell it back into slavery. So you got this big 6 foot and some change black woman who is standing in front of this door, and on the other side is all these white folks who could put her back into slavery. And she's standing outside that door saying, I'm gonna go in here and I'm gonna demand to speak. What kind of belief system did she have about herself that she felt she could do that? Who gave her the authority to do that? And
What
then
do they say? What do the kids say when you position it like that? What do they say?
they attach it to these affirmation statements. Because by then they've had like 4 weeks, 2 times a week of an affirmation statement. And they'll go find one that I have given them. And they'll say whatever it is that whichever one speaks to them about her. But I say to them, what kind of mindset did this woman have? And then and I tell them that, I said, picture it. The door, she pushes that door open. And everybody turns, and in that doorway is this big 6 foot, 200 and some change black woman who walks boldly to the front of the room and says, may I speak? And these people they know who she is because her reputation precedes her. And nobody tells her no. And she stands up there, and the first thing she says is, I am for women's rights. Not I'm a slave, former slave. Not I'm a black woman, Negro woman, colored woman. But I am a woman. And that is claiming of self. No matter what anybody says about you, that is claiming of self. And yeah, we go into, that this was, transcribed by another woman, a white woman reporter. That was very rare for the time for a white woman to be a reporter, to have that as her job. And we go into these, I do touch upon these different translations, but the fact of the matter is everybody agrees that the opening was, I am a woman's rights. And so I say to them, if she can do that in 1851, how many years ago was that? And they'll say 160. Mm-hmm. So if this woman who had everything against her, who risked her life to do that, can declare and stand for who she knows herself to be, why can't you do the same thing in 2026? Why can't you do that? Ain't nobody about to put you in slavery. There are no dangerous men waiting out the door to snatch you and sell you back down to Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama.
What are the responses? I mean, because
they are intrigued by her. And from then on, all they want to do is write about her to the point where I have to tell my students, you can no longer write about Soldier the Truth. Because they begin to attach her to the discovery of their own voices.
Yes. And I must say, you are a phenomenal storyteller. So how you approach this and how you tell a story has got to draw them into. And anybody who's been lucky enough to have an amazing teacher at some point in their lives remembers these things, these lessons that you've gotten. And they're like little tiny highlights in your life. And I'm sure that you're giving that to your students through this. But
yes,
when institutions fail students, when they don't offer this, because this is like life-changing stuff. Like what you're offering is life-changing stuff. When it's not like that, when the alternative is, you've got a teacher, and they're not all new teachers, right? New teachers are overwhelmed, but some teachers, they're like, I've been doing it like this for 40 years.
Yes.
Yeah, and I'm sticking it. This is the way it is. We come in, it's the blah, 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 blah. Who's left to carry the consequences of this?
Unfortunately, and again, as I have to tell my students, and I've had former students come back and say, Miss Pierce, my new English teacher, she's nothing like you. I said, I already told you, there ain't nobody else in the world like me. You ain't gonna find, ain't nobody. If you are lucky to have another teacher like me, God bless you. Because listen, I had some great teachers. My education was multicultural. I grew up in Stockton, California in the 80s and the 90s around gangs and gang violence, gun violence, drug violence. I speak to that a lot. I let my students know, baby, I'm from the hood. I'm educated, but I'm from the hood, and she will come out when necessary, right? But I had phenomenal teachers in high school. I had two white female teachers in high school, Mrs. Sherry Pratt, rest in peace, and Mrs. Sarah Davenport. Mrs. Pratt was my English teacher, and Mrs. Davenport was my history teacher. And Mrs. Davenport is still alive, and I sent her a copy of my book, which I'm so excited I got to do that. But they brought, what these two women gave to us was permission to find ourselves in the text. The way that Mrs. Pratt taught English, I had an AP English, freshman English, the way that she brought storytelling alive for us, and the way that Mrs. Davenport, even with the constrictions then about teaching history, she allowed us to find ourselves in the text and then to bring that in the classroom with like potlucks and bringing in different foods and stories from each of our different cultures because it was a multicultural high school. And both of these women marched for women's rights in the 60s, civil rights and women's
That's
rights.
awesome.
So I had a foundation of teachers who were like, we ain't taking none of that. And then my seventh grade teacher, Mrs. Knight, Miss Knight, eighth grade English teacher, excuse me, Miss Knight, she was also phenomenal. And then when I went on to college, San Francisco State is where well, I started at UC Santa Barbara. I had teachers from all over the world. I had teachers from Africa. I had teachers from Scotland, from England. And these teachers were renowned experts in their craft. So I had one teacher who was a renowned expert in Frederick Douglass. And yes, I did challenge him and he loved it. I had questions because I had never heard of Frederick Douglass, unfortunately. I had teachers who, I had English teachers that gave us 5 million because they allowed us to understand context. And then at San Francisco State, I had a law professor who really cemented everything for me and showed me how to further draw in context into the instruction. So the ability to tell stories, this is the teacher's investment on trying to find out who these people were. This is called lived or lived teaching, lived history. Don't teach these people as if they were not real. You need to give context. Again, what law was going on that made this situation dangerous for Sojourner? The Missouri Compromise, the Fugitive Slave Law Act. What was going on in one of the other pieces I give that I talk about is Aaron Aubrey Kaplan's Black Like I Thought I Was, which is a nonfiction piece. What was going on in the 80s, in the late 90s, early 2000s with the creation of at-home DNA tests? The census. What did the census tell us in the early 2000s? That the country was going to be what by 2040? Primarily brown. And then all of a sudden you start seeing these changes in laws and access. Why? It's a response to that census, that data saying that this country is going to be predominantly brown. And so unfortunately, it does fall on the teacher to find the connections between the text, the lived experiences of the people that they're teaching, and then connect that to the students. I really don't like that students, if I say, what happened in 1865, half of them are like, the Civil War ended? Okay, did it really? What imagine.
And what does it mean?
Yeah, you're like, so why? The context, like, why? Did the Emancipation Proclamation truly free anyone? Y'all better read the language. It did not. It did not. But you got to ask yourself, why would Abraham Lincoln establish such a doctrine? What was he doing? What's going on? And again, that's why I give, my book, I talk about the art of writing. And the fifth one is writers write about what's happening in their world. So if I'm going to give you this story from 1851, I need to be able to explain to you what was happening in 1851. Because writers write about what's happening in their world. That is what's missing in instruction today. Teachers are rushed and pressed to just push kids out the door. And you have to fight to say, no, I'm not pushing these young people out. I'm going to give them context. But I'm also going to help me be better at my craft and enjoy what I do. And I'm going to learn a little bit about these people.
And it makes the whole thing so much more fulfilling, I would imagine, from being a successful teacher.
Right. and then it also gives, again, it gives the students, the young people, regardless if it's an English class, a history class, a music class, or theater class, it gives the students permission to believe that they can tell their stories too. So if Sojourner, even though she was illiterate, if she can still get up there and tell her story, why can't I? And I have the gift of reading and writing. I have that.
Absolutely. It's like that shared bravery and inspiration to see something like that. But, you said too about the educator getting something out of it also. And let me ask you, so you're giving a lot, right? You're giving a lot to the kids. You're giving a lot of thought. Like you said, you're keeping the time. You're not rushing these kids. So that's a lot on you as the person leading the classroom. What boundaries have you had to learn as a woman, as a teacher, between serving others and disappearing yourself?
Oh, No, I don't disappear. No, no. I learned a long time ago about that. And I think that's one of the things my military background kind of gave me before I came to the classroom is that I had seen so much in the service that I had made the decision as a young woman. I mean, I joined at 20 and got out at 26, 27, that I was not going to let anybody make me hide. But that I also had to learn how to pull back when it was becoming too overwhelming for me. So I've learned how to do a search inside of me and saying, okay, where am I at in this process? Number one, and again, this is not for everybody, but the first thing I do before I ever enter my classroom is I have a prayer. And it's always, Lord, whatever it is you need me to give these young people today, use me to do that. But whatever is for me, let me see it, and let it be for me too. So it is always my thing that I pray, and then I do my breath before I walk into the classroom because I know it's heavy what I'm bringing. And then how do I support these young people through this entire 15-week, 15 and 10 or 15-week process? And so sometimes I have learned to be very aware, not even hyper vigilant, but vigilant about if this is pulling too much on my students. And
Okay.
so I will take a look around, and if I see that it's that my students are, then I'll say, okay, let's take a breath. And I'll go back and I'll look at my syllabus and I'll be like, you know what? I'm moving this. I'm moving it. I'm either moving it or I'm deleting it or I'm extending it. And sometimes I'll even say, you know what? Today's just a day to have fun. We're just gonna have some fun. Yeah, we're not gonna do this today, or I'm gonna figure out a way to make it fun. I'm gonna find a creative writing opportunity for it because I also do a lot of creative writing in the class. I have them do activities called opening lines, and I put that in the book: an opening line, a closing line, to really get them into the head of a writer. Like, here's the opening line. Now you got to finish the rest of the story. But they do it as groups. They rarely do it alone. So I try to make that fun, and then I've learned to let go of necessarily, let go of hard deadlines. The only hard deadline is when they got to take a final exam. I'm not doing all that. So I'll be like, we're going to spend 40 minutes. We're just going to have fun with this because they need to see flexibility. They need to see that not everything is rigid. That life is also about having fun. Life is about also paying attention to you and what's going on with you, how you're feeling. And then also paying attention to others, looking at the room. Oh, these young people are overwhelmed. Well, we pull them back today. Today's just going to be a writing day. Today's going to be writing lab. Whatever
It's
you need today.
interesting because you actually have, having come from a military background, which is so
Rigid.
regimented and
Mm-hmm.
strict, have that flexibility is pretty unique that you've managed to kind of take the best of all of these worlds to create this classroom where your students have the structure and
Yes.
they have like the safety of that structure, but they also have that flexibility that
Yes.
just shows that you're human.
It's important. It's important to do that. Now, everything well, I do tell my students this: education should be uncomfortable because it needs to stretch you. It needs to help you expand. So if you walk into a classroom and you are too comfortable, you're not learning. And what I mean by that is the assignments, the activities, they should grow you. And so who's to say that creative writing, that fun writing can't do that? Like, why does it always have to be so rigid? So, oh, we're gonna do ABC today, and then I said, what the no. No, there's also lessons in creative writing and fun writing and group activities. There's fun in that. And that's another way to learn. So I try to be open. Whatever spirit needs me to do in this classroom today, I'm open to that. I know there are things that I have to get done, like, the school has requirements for, certain things that have to be done at certain points. But why can't I have fun doing that as well? Why can't that, why can't my classroom be the space where students know they're not only going to come to be challenged intellectually and in skill, but also it's a space where they can find themselves, where they can begin to craft voice, where they can understand the power of storytelling, and where they can have fun, where they can laugh. The teacher's tough, but she's fair, she's honest, and I'm not a huggy type person, but there have been moments when I've seen that students need a hug. And I will stop the whole class and say, "Oh, you know what? If you need a hug, let's do it. I'm here." Because that's important to be seen. That is the thing. And that's what my students have, and you can go back 20 years, they've all said that. To be seen is everything. And not seen in a way that is false, this false imagery, this false sense of self, like being an influencer, for example. Not that, but to be seen. Someone sees me. I exist. And so to offer that, students, especially our immigrant students, they need that. They absolutely need that. And I'm here to offer that because I know what it's like to sit behind the desk and have a teacher who's been teaching for 40 years and they whip out the same lecture notes that are now yellowed and frayed from 40 years ago. Oh, yes, I do.
Right.
I remember them days. I said, I never wanted to be that teacher. I never wanted to be that
No.
teacher.
But you're it's interesting too because you clearly care so much about your students, and then you're funny because you're like, I'm not a hugger.
I'm not.
but but you've got so much care in you, and
Yes.
it seems like there's like a lot of spirituality to that.
Yes.
And you've mentioned praying before you go into the classroom. How for you has faith shaped your understanding of womanhood, leadership,
Yes.
and care?
It has. It has. It's the foundation for who I am and what I do. Now, I don't go in the classroom and tell students to pray. That's a no. We don't do that. And I always tell them, that ain't what I'm here for. No, no. That may be who I am, but that's not what I'm here for. I'm offering you the opportunity to connect to you. And these three practices allow me to do that. And you can take these things with you wherever you go. Their final exam question is, what are three things you've learned about yourself this semester that you will take with you into both your professional world and your personal? And that is important for them to be able to see themselves in the learning process, how far they've come. For me, faith has always been and will always be the center for who I am, because what it allows me to do is to see my student, to look at the syllabus and say, okay, this isn't going to work today, or to bring in others into the classroom because they need to hear more than just my voice, to find another way to teach these very different learners, to make this personal, to tell the story. It allows me to do that. Faith allows you to see others, to see yourself in others. And so, yes, my prayer is that before I walk into the classroom. It will always be that. Do the students know? No, and they don't have to know. All they know is that this class, this space, this is where I'm growing. This teacher is firm, but she's fair. She's tough, but she's fun. And so they need to see that. And I think part of what's missing, again, as I said earlier in our conversation, was that young teachers are not taught that. We're not teaching young teachers how to bring a whole authentic self into the curriculum, the syllabus, and thus into the classroom.
Okay, real quick. If you're listening and thinking more women should be hearing conversations like this, the best way to support the show is just to follow or subscribe wherever you are. It really does help it reach more people. Thanks so much. Okay, back to the show. When you were a starting out teacher versus where you are now, was it, it was different, I'm sure, in your classroom. You didn't have the self-assuredness. You didn't have all the stuff as a teacher, that experience that you had. Was it very different than how you teach now?
Actually, no.
That's awesome.
No. Well, the only thing is that with public school, I knew in teaching public school, I was not going to be able to go further with certain things like faith like faith. I knew I had it for me before I came to the classroom, but I knew that I couldn't really get down into who you are as an individual in the high school, in the secondary level, because of all the constrictions around secondary education. But what kind of secondary teacher I was almost exactly is who I still am. I was very aware of my students, where they were at, where we needed to be, but I was also aware of the rules. And so, but I rules are meant to be broken. So for example, I remember I had a 10th grade class, and we were in the textbook was a short story about Malcolm X. And I was like, oh my God, yay, we're gonna read this piece. And I had already, talked about who Malcolm X was and just not who he was as an antagonist, but who he was as an individual,
Sorry.
growing up without a father, who this person is. And I was like, we're going to read this short story. Well, one of the students, I guess the parent asked what were they reading, and the student told the parent, and then the parent called up to the school and was vehement that they didn't want their child to learn anything about that white man hating Malcolm X. And I said, well, clearly their education didn't go no further than 1963, because the Malcolm X that left this earth was not a white man hating Malcolm X. And that just really shows you about how certain characters are taught in class. And so my direct supervisor, she was like, well, Miss Pierce, you can't teach that short story. I said, okay, that's fine. I'll go another way. I'll teach Marcus Garvey. And I taught Marcus Garvey, because don't nobody know who Marcus Garvey is. They don't know that you wouldn't have a Malcolm X if there hadn't been a Marcus Garvey. And so, and I know you're listening to like, who's Marcus Garvey? Well, I'm not going to go into that. Y'all got to go find out who Marcus Garvey is, but know that he, was a Jamaican-born public speaker who came to America because he, wanted to end colorism. He wanted Black people of all colors and hues to feel a sense of pride in who they were. And he was just basically continuing the conversation about, if America continues to treat Black people in this particular way, should we leave? Right? But more than anything, he gave to Black America this sense of pride in being, I'm Black and I'm proud. So he precedes Malcolm X. He precedes the Nation of Islam. He precedes James Brown, I'm Black and I'm proud. He precedes the Black arts movement in this country. But ain't nobody teaching him, because, okay, well, I won't get into that because that's a whole other conversation.
Gotcha.
My specialty is African American literature. You don't want me, we won't do that. But just know that that was my way around that, because I'm like, you can't disregard such a pivotal moment in American history and in American literature. Alex Haley wrote Malcolm X's autobiography. You can't dismiss that because you only got one half of the story. And that's my whole goal when I go into the classroom. We will not do half of the story. This is why context is so important. Those people didn't want Sojourner to speak, not only because they didn't see her as a woman, but because the womanists, the suffragists, did not want to confuse women's rights with slavery.
Right.
With the ending of slavery. And so a lot of young people don't know that because that's not taught. These contexts are not taught. So I have always been that kind of teacher that's going to find another way to teach this in a way that helps these young people find their way and see their voice and see that who they are, who they come from is just as beautiful as anybody else.
Well, and I think that the fact that you have so much context around your own life too, there's so much. And I wanted to ask you about that too. I know we don't have all day, but I'm going to keep you as long as I have, but you create work across many spaces.
Yes.
So in addition to your expertise as a teacher, you've written an affirmations journal, Repeat After Me, Sis. You're writing and teaching, obviously. Your bakery. You host the podcast Beyond the Plate RVA. And you've talked about bringing all of that under what you call the Nourishment Collective.
Yes.
Right? Could you tell me a little bit about that?
Well, for a long time, I struggled with what a lot of young people struggle with and need help on finding their way through, is what happens when you have multiple pieces of you that likes to do different things. This world is so pressed to make a person one thing. And I just refuse. And so I had to
I love you. You're like, I just won't do it.
I won't do it. Because we come here with so many wonderful gifts. It's just that one gift is the umbrella for them all. And the trick is recognizing what that one umbrella is. And for me, and I've said this for years, the umbrella is education. And underneath that umbrella is teaching, writing, and speaking. And so when I started looking at, well, who am I as a baker? Well, baking, I opened up the bakery because I was leaving teaching, because I was burnt out. I was tired. And I knew that baking made me feel good. It calmed me down. It was another way for me to express my love and sincerity for being here, for families, for people, for my own story, my family's food story. And it's just an extension, a further extension of me. I'm a foodie person. Of course, I love food, but I love the story of food, and particularly soul food, and just how our palates are often shaped by our culture, our cultural experiences with food, and how that also shapes our mindset about food. And so I'm a writer. That's what I do, and I just feel like writers should try different genres. And so being a playwright is first and foremost who I am. I love theater, and theater has informed my ability to tell stories in fiction and in nonfiction. I just feel like writers should try those different modes or mediums to figure out where they can grow the most, but also to challenge them, right? So the Nourishment Collective I came down to, or what Spirit gave me, was that do not be ashamed of these different pieces of you. Because no matter where someone finds you, Rebekah, they find you. And it is that, wherever that is what that person needed at the moment. So if they find me on my foodie podcast, Beyond the Plate RBA, this is where they find me. And then might bring them to Rebekah, the nonfiction writer with the lemonade mindset over on Substack. Or they might find my bakery. But wherever they find me, they have found me. And so I nourish in all of those platforms. I'm nourishing you in the bakery. I'm nourishing you on the foodie podcast. I'm nourishing you in our online bookstore, in my written text. That's who I am. I'm a nourisher. I think I described myself at the end of last semester as I am a gardener. I plant seeds. And so wherever you go, you'll find my seed. That's where I'm at. And so that's kind of how I came up with the nourishment and kind of wrapping all these different pieces of me, because I all of it is storytelling. All of it is storytelling. We tell our story through what we put on our plate. We tell our story through what we listen to and what we read. We tell our story in how we position words on the page. We tell our story in how we show up. And that's my whole framing for the Nourishment Collective. Wherever you find me, you have found me. You have found nourishment.
I love this. And I love that there are so many ways to find you and so many different
Mhm.
ways that you do nourish. And that leads me to my last question for you, which is there are women listening
Mhm.
who are exhausted from
Mhm.
holding everyone else together and nourishing others. What do you want them to hear today?
Yeah, no, you come first. Again, I don't step into I have to, I'm really serious about this. And I've been writing about this for a long time. This is why I started the Lemonade Mindset. And why I started affirmations for myself. I can't care for others if I don't care for the greatest love of my life first, and that is me. And so if it's going to empty my well, then I can't do it. If if someone says they love you, but they keep doing the thing that hurts you, and you keep telling them to stop, but they keep doing it, that's not love. And so you have to learn how to let them go. So my memoir that I wrote, called I Love Me More, that was my after leaving my tumultuous violent marriage. I learned from that experience that I can't give my light to other people. That light belongs to me. And it is my job to make sure that it continues to shine. And so if it's going to rob me of my health, which I have learned the hard way about being robbed of my health because I gave too much to everything. If it's going to rob me of my health, if it's going to rob me of my voice, if it's going to try to steal my joy, then I don't want it. So I work on me before I can give anything to anyone else. And that is so important. I know the word no. It's a sentence. And I don't have to explain it. And sometimes, but sometimes even I struggle with explaining because people be like, why? And I've just learned how to tell people because I said no.
Yes, yes,
Right?
it
Because I
is.
said no.
Yes.
Right? So, but I've had to learn also to not be like, oh my God, they're going to hate me. I don't care. And it's almost the same. And I don't want to say I don't care because even caring is an emotion. But what I say is this, particularly for my students, I'm not here to be your friend. I have a job to do and I'm going to do my job. But if by the end of this we become friends, then this is the best thing ever. But I am not your friend at this moment. So you will call me Professor Pierce, or you will call me Dr. Pierce, or you will call me Miss Rebekah, or you will call me Miss Pierce. But what you will not do is call me by my first name because we are not on the same level. And that's not to be disrespectful, but that's to teach you to understand the journey that I have been through to find me. And you have to respect that journey. You ain't got to like it, but you got to respect it. And so at some point, unless you want to be put in the ground at a young age, whether it's your children, your mate, or your coworkers, you're going to have to learn how to put you first. If it does not feed your soul, if it does not grow you and expand you, if it does not align with who you know yourself to be or who you want to be, then the answer is no. Stop trying to be seen in the negative way. Oh my gosh, she does everything. Look at her. Because baby, when you die, what's going to go on your tombstone? The day you were born and the day you died. Not, she made the best cookies on the planet. That ain't going on your tombstone. It's not.
This, by the way, is totally reminding me of when we first hopped on the phone. I'm like, I just cut my son a bagel.
Yes.
That's going to go in between. She cut the best bagels.
She cut the best bagels. Yeah, no, I'm not doing that. And it's just really getting to that moment when you realize, you have a choice in how you want to live your life. Gratitude or grievance. How are you stepping into the classroom? Because I had a lot of teachers emailing me about, oh my God, I'm dreading going back to work. I'm like, why? That's a mindset. That's all you. That is all you. You can change that instantly. It doesn't matter what them children are doing when you walk into that classroom. That's your classroom. The attitude you carry into that classroom dictates how that classroom is going to go. So if you are learning how to quiet yourself, heal yourself, begin that healing process, figure out what works for you, what's growing you, what's stifling you, what's hindering you, then you will look at not returning to the classroom as ugh, but returning to the classroom as, this is my space. This is me. This is where I shine. This is where I grow. And I have an opportunity to give that to someone else. Don't let them people upset you, rock you. Oh, no, ma'am. Because at the end of the day, once again, the birth date and the date you died. No, ma'am. No, I don't play that. Not no more. No.
Rebekah, you are awesome. I am so grateful that you were here. I feel like there's so many takeaways. And I love, by the way, I keep talking and not letting you go, but how you say gratitude versus grievance, because so many people are like, gratitude, gratitude, gratitude. And I've actually said before in a gratitude class once, I was like, I feel like I'm so doing this without thinking. It's not feeling like deep gratitude. I keep writing my coffee. But when you look at it versus gratitude versus grievance, it's it's your whole shift. It's how you're, you can see what you don't want.
Exactly. And again, it's just, as I press into my students, as soon as those eyes open, you've got to start training your brain to go immediately to gratitude. Thank you. And if you believe in God or not, whether it's thank you, God, or just thank you, because the truth of the matter is you really had no say as to whether or not your heart wanted to keep beating, or if your lungs wanted to keep processing air. You have no control over that. Your body works autonomously, right? Involuntarily, meaning you don't get to control that. The only thing you can control is how you think as soon as your eyes open.
Oh, that's so good. Thank you so much. You are awesome. Thank you so much for being here today. I can't thank you enough. And I'm going to have all the information we talked about, including a link to Marcus Garvey, in the show notes.
Please do that.
I will absolutely do that. Absolutely. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for having me, and have a great day.
You too. I really appreciated this conversation with Rebekah, especially the way she challenged some of the assumptions we make so quickly about kids and behavior, and how those assumptions often say more about what we've been taught to expect than what's actually going on. That shift alone can change everything. And next week, we're taking that idea of rethinking what's not working and turning it into something else entirely new. We're talking about what happens when frustration isn't something to push through, but something to pay attention to, with the one and only Jess Ekstrom. In the meantime, if this episode opened your eyes like it opened mine, send it to a friend. That's how these conversations keep going. Thanks for joining us. See you next time on Roar.